Congressman Goldwater?
Yes, Bill.
Yes, good morning, sir. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
I want to introduce you in an audio way, my next-door partner, Judy Busby, my co-host on Viewpoint.
Hi, Judy.
Hi there. It's so gracious of you to join us. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we really appreciate the politeness that you have extended us here, Congressman Goldwater. You've reached a point where you don't have to go out and beat the Hastings anymore like you used to as a congressman. You had quite a distinguished career, sir. How unique that a father and son would serve in the legislative body of the United States at the same time. How many others are you aware of, Congressman?
Well, at the time that I served in the Congress, which was 1969 to 1984, there was only one other father-son from Missouri, the Symingtons.
Oh, sure, Stuart
Yes.
Symington.
Stuart and Jim Symington. And then today, of course, you have Ron Paul
Yes.
and his son Rand Paul. So it doesn't happen that often. In fact, when my father and I served together, it was the first time in the history that a father and son from two different states served together.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable. You were serving California at the time, and he, of course, Arizona.
Correct.
That's very, very unusual, and distinguished service in both bodies, I might add. Very, very interesting that there would be that father-son. And incidentally, you were supporter of Ron Paul in his early going on the presidential efforts, weren't you?
Well, Ron and I served together in the Congress, and so we've been good friends. We just happen to share the same libertarian viewpoints about our Constitution and the type of government that we feel best serves the purpose of America, and that is liberty, freedom. It's kind of a natural philosophy because inherent in, I think, every human species is the desire to be free and not be controlled.
Well, it's interesting, as you say, that's just so basic that it's citizenship 101, really. And but we note back way back in the fellows who wrote their Constitution, who did a pretty doggone good job, by the way, considering the time in which that was written. The quotes of Thomas Jefferson that keep coming to the front all the time, and his fellow patriots. How have we drifted so far from what was so basically and articulated so well in that time?
Well, that's a good question, and I'm not sure I have the answer to this. There's something involved in psychology of the human species that if you hang something out in front of them for nothing, they tend to like that better than having to work for it.
And
That hasn't changed, has it?
So that's the problem we have. We have too many politicians that go to Washington to promise to hand something free to various groups of people throughout the country. And it's a slow creep. You get a special privilege here or a special appropriations or gift of money there, and zoning laws favor certain types of people. It's just a sort of a slow erosion of our constitutional granting of our freedoms, and it's troubling.
Sir, that's such a great segue. I just can't pass it up. Your father's book, With No Apologies, he had said in the dictionary, the first definition of politics is the science or art of political government. No suggestion of dishonor.
Excuse me, Judy?
Yeah.
Could you speak closer to the microphone? I can hardly hear you.
I think he fixed it.
There
Did
you
that
go.
help?
That's
Good.
great.
Okay. No suggestion of dishonor attaches to the word, but a politician is defined as a seeker or holder of public office who is more concerned about winning favor or retaining power than about maintaining principles. I guess your dad felt that way, and did you get that from him then, or did you come to that realization on your own?
Well, I watched and observed my father's words and actions, and it just seemed, I guess, it just seemed right to me that made a lot of common sense. Elected officials are servants of the people, and they're to do the people's business. Unfortunately, the people sometimes get lazy. They don't pay attention. They don't ask questions, and they don't hold their representatives accountable for their actions. And it's only when a catastrophe occurs that arouses the public ire, that all of a sudden we take a harder look at these politicians. But we go about our daily work, and we trust that we have good representation, and that's not always the case.
No, it's not. It's not at all. Tell me, as you look back and as you look at today and forward, what do you think of the whole political scene, thinking about your dad's service and your service and today?
Well, Judy, I can say that America is truly an experiment in liberty. And unlike most countries in history, it was founded on a set of ideas rather than on ethnic or religious or geographic conditions. And for the first time in human history, government's purpose wasn't to grant or deny rights as it saw fit, but to protect its citizens' natural rights. And that there lies the standard by which you must judge representation. We, of course, are not a static country. We change daily, monthly, yearly. And we have all kinds of influences, from war to natural disasters to human tragedy. And so conditions change, people change, and government changes. This is inherent, and it's a good thing. But I must say that there is a big difference between today and many years ago when my father served with some great statesmen like Everett Dirksen from Illinois.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Our neighbor right up the line here.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And I served with Les Ahrens, who was the minority leader. He was there, walked me down the aisle, and he was a good friend and a good legislator. In those days, everybody got along. Everybody worked together on common problems. You don't see that today so much. You see more of an anger, too much animosity, and intense competition. I think today the lines are drawn. Maybe it started back in 1964. Lines were drawn between conservative philosophy and liberal philosophy, and that has intensified over the years. We have two great political philosophies at work. One wants to take away your freedoms, and the other one wants to preserve them. So the battle lines have been drawn. The intensity of the conflict continues to grow. So it's not as friendly of a place anymore, Congress, as it was when I was there. I served under Speaker Tip O'Neill, who was he was a tough old Irish Democrat from Boston area.
Oh, yes.
And he was very partisan, but he realized that unless the minority has a voice, democracy stops working. And so in spite of the fact that the Democrats controlled the House and the Senate while I was there, he allowed participation by the minority. And starting in about the 1990s, that kind of bipartisanship stopped. And the Republicans froze the Democrats out when they were in control, and the Democrats froze the Republicans out when they were in control. And as a result, not much really got done.
And the nation wasn't being served.
And it wasn't being served. But I got to say that this current crop of members of Congress that were brought in by the Tea Party activities has a fresh new face, and I was pleasantly surprised when they adopted new rules that allowed the minority to participate. And Speaker Boehner said, "Okay, we have to have 24 hours so everybody gets a chance to read the legislation." We had open rules, and I'm talking about today. They have open rules which allows unlimited debate and amendments and motions. And so I think, hopefully, I have hope that we're going back to the days when the Congress worked together and had fierce debate, but then took the vote, and whoever won. But it wasn't without full participation, and I'm glad to see that with this new crop of members in the House of Representatives.
That's very good news. You know, I think that what you've said might be the reason for the growing cynicism in this country. The business of not having a lot of statesmen, you've really got a lot of politicians who are going at one another all the time, so that we plain people are thinking, well, what the hey? What's going on?
I agree with you. There is a lot of cynicism because all we hear is the bickering. We don't hear the united effort to solve problems. But I mean, the other problem is, and it's not just politicians, but it is philosophy that is at the center of this battle. How do you want this country to be? Do we want more freedom, more liberty, more individual initiative? Do we want capitalism and free markets to work? That can only happen if you limit the size of government and its intrusion into our lives. And that philosophy of liberty is in stark contrast to those who espouse John Maynard Keynes, the economist from England, who feels that government knows best, and only government can solve real problems. So we have the conservative versus the liberal today. We have Obamacare because it was passed when the Democrats, the liberals, controlled both houses of the Congress. And that's more control, in this case, over our health care. We have environmental laws that are national, controlled by the federal government. They're going to come into Illinois and tell farmers how much dirt they can, how much dust they can stir up, how clean the water has to be. And it's not that those aren't good things, but those all ought to be, in my philosophy, relegated to the states and not imposed by some bureaucrat 1,000 miles away who seems to think they know better than your local community or your local state and state government. So you've got these great philosophies of liberal versus conservative fiercely waging war on each other. But I am, as I say, glad that Speaker Boehner and this new crop of congressmen have at least allowed the philosophies and the voices to be heard.
Well, you mentioned, waging war on one another, and it's axiomatic that what's going on, that there's going to be a necessity, a lot of what is now termed collateral damage. So in terms of war talk, politically speaking, as a country, the more that the government, I think it's a basic 101 philosophy that the government governs less, governs best. And it just doesn't seem to be that way. You mentioned the lack of congeniality and the lack of working together. Logan County's friend Ray LaHood made an honest attempt to bridge that gap, and that fell flat due to basic partisanship.
Yeah. Well, you're right. And the other thing that I think we should point out is that the United States and the Founding Fathers, fresh from the dictatorial powers of the King of England, realized that instead of having central power dictating to the people, we were a conglomeration of federal states, and so we dispersed power to the states. And the 10th Amendment says those activities that are not given to the federal government are relegated to the states.
Right.
And that's state autonomy and the state authority has slowly been eroded over the years by invoking the Commerce Clause that the courts have found allows the federal government to take on more and more responsibility that once was given to the states. Mm-hmm. And I think that was the genius of our founding fathers. We are slowly creeping back to that centralized power that we escaped from 200-300 years ago.
I would like to ask you, if I may, sir, about this federal budget, or lack thereof. The federal government is in very bad shape. The state governments are individually in very bad shape, and it just trickles all the way down to the municipalities. What would be your take on this? I think it's an awful problem, and now they're talking about the entitlements. What's your take on that?
Well, those are difficult problems. We are in a recession, which is not the first one we've been in. We've had over 15 really serious recessions. And when you're in recession, if you are in a period of economic instability, that hurts everybody, even all the way down the to the workers. And you have to examine why and how we got into this recession. And again, I would contend it is because of the federal government's excessive powers that put us in this recession, and primarily the Federal Reserve, which was created in 1913, supposedly to bring stability to our economy. And they have done everything but create stability. They have used their powers to manipulate the economy when it's running out of control or it's running hard. Mm-hmm. They cinch down on the economy by raising interest rates, and when we're in the slow economy, they drop interest rates. They manipulate our economy, and then when we're in debt like we are today, instead of cutting back on programs because we don't have the money, they, using the power that they have, print new money and put new money in circulation with the idea that somehow printing money is going to solve the recession, when in fact what it winds up doing is creating more instability by causing inflation and the devaluation of the dollar. So the problems we have today can be pointed to not at you and I as individual workers, but to our government in Washington. And so that's where the stability has to start. We have to get back to some basics of working within balanced budgets, and if you don't have it, you don't spend it. And to curb greatly the powers of the Federal Reserve to manipulate our economy.
How about raising the debt limit then? How do you feel about that?
Well, Judy, all that does is give the bureaucrats and the politicians in Washington more money to spend. So, I mean, at some point in time, you have to stop this. You have to put a chokehold on this rampant cost of government. And I think the Republicans are using this debt limit to their advantage. We'll see how it works out, by demanding that if we raise the debt limit, we must have some controls on spending. And that's going to be the battle coming up this week and next. And I hope they're successful, because all that raising the debt limit does is just open the floodgates for more spending. Mm-hmm. There's got to be some kind of constraint. And if the politicians won't use it themselves, then here's an opportunity that somebody, and hopefully a majority in the Congress, will put some kind of restraints on our spending, because that is the main problem.
Well, you know, sir, I give a partial quote that your father, Senator Goldwater, made in 1984 on the Senate floor. I take this from the jacket of your book, Pure Goldwater, which we have on display here in front of our camera. This program, by the way, will be carried live on WLCN online. Senator Goldwater said at that time, "We sit around here day after day and never do a doggone thing. If we want to get this bill passed, we ought to get down to work. It's only 9 p.m. Well, we don't have that kind of a work ethic anymore, you know? And that's one of the reasons that your father was so extremely important to those of us out here in the bastion of conservatism in the Midwest. We still can remember with great satisfaction his wonderful quote on extremism. I thought that was extremely on target at the time, and it certainly is going to be said today.
Well, I thank you for that. He you know, he was a good man. He was a terrific father. I never saw him very much because he was either away during the Second World War or he was in politics in Washington. But when we got together, it was quality time, and I remember as a young boy him taking us camping, all the kids camping. Almost every weekend we would explore the forests and the deserts and the mountains and the canyons of Arizona. And that was a wonderful, wonderful experience for us growing up. But on top of that, he was a strict father, not by physical means, but by example. He loved his country. He had high values and morals. He was patriotic, and just by his example, it kind of rubbed off on all of us kids. And as a result, I think we are better for it. But he also, I think, was participated in the political arena and left his mark.
He did that.
He had a philosophy and a point of view and the ability to express it. And as a result, he wound up being one of the leaders of the Republican Party.
By the way, you had a great bonding experience, and I saw the picture of it in Pure Goldwater. I've had the privilege of rafting the Colorado River from Page down to Lake Mead. Anyway, spent 8 days on the water down there. A wonderful experience, and I saw a picture of you and your family taking that very trip.
Well, that's a wonderful adventure, isn't it?
Yes, it certainly is.
Yeah, it's a terrific rafting experience, and I've been down it at least 5 times.
Oh, boy.
Most of them with my father. I remember one time he took 21 Boy Scouts down on these big rubber rafts. And another time we went down in these wooden boats.
Oh, with the rowing.
Well, we had wooden boats, which are very dangerous in the Colorado because there's so many rocks to run into, and if you punch a hole in a wooden boat, you're
going to water.
Yeah, but that's a beautiful experience. I'm glad, George, you had a chance to experience that. Or it's Bill, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Today, I don't know.
Today is Bill.
When I get home, it may be something else, but we'll talk about that.
I was looking at my little black cat. I called him George. That's why that came out.
We have one here. Tell us about your view of the Republican Party today, Congressman.
Well, I think we're blessed to have a two-party system in this country to start out with. So many other countries have multiple parties, and so they govern by coalition. Today, here in the United States, we have a two-party system: the Republicans and the Democrats, and that's easier to manage than coalitions. And so I think we're blessed. The Republican Party was founded in Michigan, Jackson, Michigan, in 1854. And it's surprising, the Republican Party was founded in opposition to slavery. Not too many people understand or know that. But back in 1954, the party began. And, of course, Lincoln was one of our more eminent members. Mm-hmm. But the Republican Party, I think, has, over the years, been tried and tested, and it still is a viable party. I think the Republican Party was changed into and in control of the liberal Eastern establishment in the early history of this country. Mm-hmm. In fact, and then in 1964, my father strode to the platform. It was that 1980, I believe it was, in Chicago, and he said to the convention, he said, let's grow up, conservatives. If you want to take back the party, and I think we can, let's go to work. And that started what we today know as the Republican Party, with a philosophy which primarily follows conservative or libertarian thinking. So I think the party, the Republican Party, stands for something. It stands for a philosophy. The liberals and the Democrats, they stand for feelings. They don't have a philosophy of government. They kind of stick their finger up in the air and find out who is hurting today, and they throw money at it. Mm-hmm. They don't really have a philosophy that governs their politics or their legislation. The Conservative Party or the Republican Party is a party that believes in the individual, and that the individual only prospers when he's free. It's based on the laws of nature and God. Conservatism is not an economic theory. Mm-hmm. This country, I think, was developed from the individual initiative and ambition. And to regard man and treat them as if they are all the same is to consign them to ultimate slavery. And so this is the backbone or the philosophy of the Republican Party, and that is to enhance individual freedom. And by doing so, it allows the individual to climb to the heights that they want to, or not to. And that is the genius of our founding fathers that gave us as much liberty as possible.
Well, that's exactly the basis for why we're so conservative, most of us back here in central Illinois, particularly in this bastion of agricultural stability here, here in Logan County. Just taking something from somebody to give something to has not is simply not. It can't work, and ultimately, it's like building a house with cards. Ultimately, that bottom card is going to come out, and that'll be the collapse of it.
Well, I think my father understood that when government decides to give something to a particular group, it has to first take something away from the private productive sector, mm-hmm. By way of taxes or borrowing. Government really creates nothing. It only takes and redistributes.
Right.
Sir, before we get away, I'd like to have you're in the border state down there where immigration is a real problem. Comment or two about the immigration problem, Congressman?
Well, I personally think it's much ado about nothing. I grew up in Arizona. The Mexicans would come up from Mexico every year to work in our agricultural fields. Some would stay, but most of them went back home. Mm-hmm. They didn't have border patrol. They didn't have fences. They came and went because to get work.
Sure.
Now times have changed. It's gotten worse in Mexico. Mexico is somewhat of a corrupt nation in as much as they only have a two-class system. You have the very rich and the very poor, and not a very solid or large middle class. Mm-hmm. And as a result, there's not much work, there's not much investment, and there's not much work down there for them. So they go wherever they can to feed their families, and in many respects you can't blame them. Recently it's gotten out of hand because of this boom that we went through. These last booms where houses were being built as fast as you could build them, and that's where a lot of the Mexicans wound up swinging hammers.
Sure.
So it is a problem, but it's not. Where it is a problem today is that it's turned into a war of criminals down there on the border that are shuffling drugs and guns and money back and forth. It's a war zone down there. And I think, and as far as the Mexican is concerned, they're good people. They're hard workers, they're Christians, they love their families and watch out for them. They're good, they're the kind of citizens we would like to have. And you remember with the history of this country, we had waves of Italians and waves of Irish and waves of other European countries, all of whom who had to go through this demagoguing and scrutiny, and they were at the bottom of the barrel and had to work their way up. We're a nation of nationalities, and we just, the Mexican just happens to be in the forefront today.
Well, the big problem is the entitlements. If it wasn't for the immigrations, years back, Senator Barry Goldwater and his son Congressman wouldn't be able to serve the country they've done so nobly and so well. But these are immigrants who came here for the opportunities, and they didn't have their hand out. What are you going to do for me? That's one of the problems with the immigration problems is all the entitlements, and that's the thing that's a real concern to me.
Well, the main problem, Bill, is that our immigration laws are a mess, and there's not enough guts back there in Washington to step up to the plate, either at President Obama, no leadership in the Congress, nobody has the guts to step up and straighten these immigration laws out so these people know what and where they stand. All they do is, and like a lot of other Americans who are citizens, take advantage of these social programs. And, you got to clean up our immigration laws so that we know where these people come. It's just not Mexicans coming to this country.
Oh,
My
no.
God, we got people from every nationality in the world sneaking across our borders or figuring out a way to get here. This is the land of freedom, and people will migrate to where they can be free. And, like a magnet. And the Mexicans are, they're getting beat up over this because they're very visible. But you've got every nationality in the world of people that want to come here and do try to sneak in here. And it's our Congress that's not doing anything, and our president, just give us a level playing field of rules and regulations on how this should be operated. And it's unfortunate, but it exists. Now, as far as our borders are concerned, the Constitution allows the states to declare war if the federal government is not protecting them. And I've suggested to our government here in Arizona that we ought to mobilize our National Guard and our military and declare war against Mexico. Now, that's pretty far-fetched, but I think there is justification for President Obama to mobilize military strength on our borders and, if necessary, go into Mexico for about 50 or 100 miles and clean out these cartels and all this drug and all this ammunition and guns and restore stability back to that part of our border and then give it back to Mexico.
On that note, we'll express our sincere appreciation to the Honorable Barry Goldwater, Jr., past Congressman of the United States Congress, son of famed Barry Goldwater, who was a distinguished senator and served our country so well. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention that you and John Dean put together an excellent book called Pure Goldwater, a compilation of Senator Goldwater's thoughts and notes and memoirs. We thank you for that. that is very interesting reading. I commend folks to get out and buy that book and read what True American had to say. With that being said, Judy, do you have any comments before we close?
I just want to tell you, sir, that not only do you look like your dad, but you're just as plain speaking as he is. Bless your heart.
Well, thank you, Judy and Bill. It's always fun to be on your program, so let's do it again sometime.
Well, I'd like that. We thank you very, very much, sir. Goodbye.
Goodbye.